only on History.
This is AM Agenda. Thanks for your company. With me this morning, the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary to the Shadow Treasurer, Ed Husic, and also the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Josh Frydenberg. Josh Frydenberg, you're heading to Asia with the Prime Minister this weekend. An important visit for him to Tokyo, Beijing and Seoul. Now, first of all, if we focus on Tokyo, there's still optimism that the government's going to strike a free trade agreement with Japan, but is there any prospect that it might be derailed given the events, the ruling there at the International Court of Justice this week on the whaling issue?
No, I think the FTA and the whaling issues are two very separate issues, and Japan has said they'll adhere to the International Court's decision on whaling, which is a good decision. In terms of the free trade negotiations with Japan, Andrew Robb's done a fantastic job in accelerating those negotiations. We're getting extremely close. Japan's been a great friend of Australia. In fact, Kieran, ever since Sir Robert Menzies and his equivalent in Japan, Prime Minister Kishi, inked the 1957 Trade and Commerce Agreement between the two countries, Japan has been a key partner for Australia, and their investment has helped develop a lot of our resource sector, both oil and gas and in terms of other natural resources. So I think the Japanese-Australia relationship's in very good shape, and the Prime Ministerial visit will get very close to concluding an FTA with Japan.
Do you think that Japan will abide by the ruling? They're saying they will, but under Article 8 of the Whaling Convention, scientific whaling is still allowed. Would you anticipate that they will continue along those lines? As we know, the Prime Minister, Abe, is a very strong nationalist, described as a hawk by many.
Well, look, in terms of whaling, it was a very decisive decision by the International Court. I think it was 12-4, and so the decision has been handed down, and I believe that Japan will stay true to their word there, and I welcome that. Can I say the other thing that we're doing in Japan, or the Prime Minister is doing in Japan, is kick-starting the trial project for the Colombo Plan, which has been a great initiative of Julie Bishop, the Foreign Minister, because it's going to mean that thousands of Australian students or young people will get the opportunity to work and to travel and to study in our region. And the Colombo Plan was a great initiative back in the 1950s by Percy Spender, the then Foreign Minister under Menzies. This is now a reverse Colombo Plan, which is going to send thousands of our young people to the region to better understand what is happening there and to seize those opportunities. So that Japanese leg is going to be very good.
Okay, well, I would come back to you on a couple of the other points shortly, but Ed Husic, on the government's response to that decision this week in The Hague about the whaling program, it was subdued from the government. Do you think that Tony Abbott's handled this appropriately, given that the free trade agreement is in the closing stages, that he obviously does not want to be gloating about this ahead of his visit just a couple of days away?
The spin that's being put out by the coalition is that he doesn't want to be gloating. The reality is he's very bashful because he failed to support the concerns of the Australian public on the issue of whaling, and we went and took this case to the ICJ back in 2010, and it's been hard fought, and it's been an important win to ensure that we don't have commercial whaling dressed up in a lab coat and being an excuse to slaughter thousands of whales. What we hope now is that if Japan does have a scientific program it conducts, it should be done on a non-lethal basis, and that we are able to ensure that the scientific discovery that needs to be done and the research that needs to be done proceeds, but not at the expense of culling so many whales. So this has been an important
the Prime
win.
Minister, do you think, Ed Husic, that it would be appropriate or to raise whaling on this trip by the Prime Minister? Is it really going to achieve anything, given the court case has been run and won, and he wants to focus on trade?
I agree. I think if ostensibly the talks are about trade, then they should focus on that, and all parties should now recognise and respect the ICJ decision, an important decision that validates the type of concerns that were held by the Australian public when they saw the horrific images of whales being culled under the guise of scientific research. So I think this has come and gone. We now need to move on to other elements of the relationship, and trade is a very important one. Can I just say on the Colombo plan?
Just quickly,
because Josh introduced
just
it.
quickly.
I think the Colombo plan and having young Australians go into the region, very good. Why would we go in, focus necessarily at the first level at Japan, I think is puzzling because of the strength of the relationship has been established over many years. The priority should be in our region where relationships do need to be strengthened, particularly in Indonesia. We've gone through the stresses and strains that have been brought on by some of the decisions of this government. If you're going to use the Colombo plan, use it where it counts, use it locally, and make sure we strengthen our relationship with Indonesia.
All right, Josh, you can respond to that, but I also want to get your thoughts on the visit to Beijing. There have been difficulties in the China relationship after our government's rebuke of China over its air defence zone in the East China Sea. China didn't appreciate that at all. Would you expect this visit to see any of those awkward moments, particularly off the back of the visit to Tokyo? Mr Abbott visiting Tokyo before he heads to Beijing, that might not be appreciated either.
Well, firstly, can I just give Ed some comfort and say that Indonesia is part of the 4 countries that will be part of the Colombo Plan's initial pilot, so that's good news, and we absolutely value the key relationship we have with Indonesia. We encourage young people to go there in their droves. In terms of China, Kieran, you're right, it has been some challenging times in the relationship, but it's an absolutely critical partnership and friendship, and it's our largest trading partner, China. We have at various times the greatest number of immigrants coming to this country, the greatest number of tourists coming to this country, and the greatest number of students coming to this country, all from China. So we must make sure that the relationship is handled extremely well and constructively. I believe in Xi Jinping, the current leader of China, and Tony Abbott do already have a very good relationship. They'll be working together in the G20. China is chairing APEC just before the G20. And we've heard some very positive statements, most recently from the Commerce Minister in China, as well as the Premier in China, about wanting to accelerate a free trade deal with Australia. And that free trade deal has been the subject of negotiations since 2005, so it's dragged on a bit too long, and we want it to conclude as soon as possible.
Let's wrap up with one last story, and this is the report in The Australian that Joe Hockey's going to have to find savings to the magnitude of $60 billion a year within the decade. Josh Frydenberg, the expectation management continues with the drip feed from the Commission of Audit, doesn't it?
Well, there will have to be some very tough decisions made in relation to the budget, but that's only because of the fiscal mess that we were left by the Labor government. You see, they gave us 600.
Why not release the whole report? Why not release it, get it out there, this Commission of Audit, as Labor says you should?
We are considering the report. It's some hundreds of pages, and when the time is appropriate, it will be released to the public. I must remind Labor that when they got the Ken Henry review, they sat on it for more than 6 months. But the point is, we have a $667 billion debt bill that's coming over the next decade. That's $23,000 for every Australian man, woman and child. We have a $12 billion annual interest bill. That's $230 million every week that we pay just in interest on the debt that Labor left us. So we have a huge task, and the budget will be the start of that.
Ed Husick, the Coalition's got a good point, doesn't it, when it says that the Henry report was sat on for 6 months and then just dropped on the community by the government of the day without any consultation?
All we are seeing is positioning by this government. Since they've come in, they've padded the deficit with decisions that they've made, spending decisions that have added to the size of the deficit, the most notable being $9 billion to the RBA that didn't ask for it. Joe Hockey gave it over to them, and they have deliberately increased the size of the deficit for 2 reasons. 1, to make a political point, and 2, to condition people for the cuts that we know are coming by this government. We released last week PBO figures that put to an end this notion that was just floated by Josh about the $667 million debt or size of the debt that was being put forward. by that side. It doesn't matter, your figures have been padded out by the decisions that you've made and are quite incorrect. And so what they should be doing, Kieran, is releasing the actual Commission of Audit. They promised, and this is the key difference, they might go and say, oh, Ken Henry's report was sat on for however long they're claiming. This government said they would release the Audit of Commission report early. They're holding it back because they're hiding from the WA people and treating them with contempt. They're hiding that grab bag of cuts that they are going to basically unfold leading into the budget.
We're out of time, gents. Ed Husic, Josh Frydenberg, have a great day. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kieran. Thanks, Ed.
A quick break on AM Agenda. Back in just a moment. Stay with us.